Daenerys Targaryen is bad because she said she wanted to break the wheel. When she got to Westeros and she started fighting other big houses, well, she burned them and she didn't treat them right. And so she showed that she was just the same as everyone else and she wasn't breaking the wheel. Stop saying dumb things. I really hate defending show specific choices because the logic of the show was shit by the end, and so I don't actually really like the line, the whole breaking the wheel, but the way it's misused, it's not a good line, but the way that even in its basic form is misunderstood and misapplied is so fucking frustrating because no one seems to fucking get what the metaphor actually means. And no, the metaphor has nothing to do with, oh, I burned some Tarleys, I'm so sorry. So let's break this down. Like I said, breaking the wheel, that line, that speech or whatever, is a show invention because in the books, Tyrion and Daenerys have not met as of yet. So in the show, Tyrion and Daenerys are having that first meeting with each other, they're feeling each other out, and it seems like they're getting a good rapport and their conversation is building towards something. And so Tyrion asks her, okay, well, how do you expect to be able to rule in Westeros? What are you going to do? Right here, you conquered a city with only the support of the small folk, and it was really hard, wasn't it? You need the support of the rich people to be able to conquer a country easily. And then he goes and he lists all the ways that all the different families are going to like her, blah, blah, blah. Then Daenerys says, Stark, Baratheon, Lannister, Tyrell, they're all just spokes on a wheel, and they're crushing those on the ground. And Tyrion goes, oh, well, that's a nice sentiment, wanting to stop the wheel. Other people have said that before. And Daenerys famously says, I don't want to stop the wheel, I want to break the wheel. So let's break down this metaphor, since apparently metaphor is very hard for large sections of the internet to process. So we have a wheel, okay? We have a wheel that is crushing those on the ground, okay? And then we have spokes in that wheel, the spokes reinforcing the wheel so that it can crush people on the ground. Cool? That's the metaphorical image, okay? Now, let's think of what is the metaphorical image being used to reinforce, okay? What's the symbolism? Now, I would argue that the wheel represents the institutions of Westeros, these higher institutions that keep all of these noble families in charge and keep the noble families kind of struggling against each other to maintain their own positions. So whether we're in the midst of a literal conflict for the throne or just the maintaining of power, these families are always in struggle, always in conflict to kind of one-up each other a little bit here and there. Whether it's the extreme of an open war for the throne or just the petty politics in the country. Now, the issue with these institutions is they ignore the vast majority of the people. Those on the ground, who she's talking about, are being crushed by the wheel as it continues to turn, as it continues to do, the business as usual of these power structures in Westeros. Then the metaphor gets a little deeper. What are the spokes on the wheel? The spokes on the wheel are the major families, Lannister, Baratheon, Tyrell, Stark, etc. These are the spokes of the wheel that are reinforcing the power of the wheel. In other words, the institutions are being reinforced by the major families that benefit from them. So rather than pausing the business as usual, these institutions that are being reinforced by the aristocracy, the great houses, Daenerys says, I would rather just break the fucking wheel. In other words, break the institutions as upheld by the aristocracy that at the moment are causing the harm being inflicted on the small folk, those on the ground. Now here is where the internet likes to conflate things because, ooh, the dragon lady bad and the show said that she was bad and I just believe what the show said, even though I criticize every other fucking aspect of that last final season. But the Daenerys arc was the one that was pristine. Yeah, fuck off. But anyway, how people like to misconstrue it is they especially with this scene with the Tarleys, they like to say oh, you're not being any different. You are being another spoke in the wheel. You are reinforcing that struggle for power. But again, what is the point of breaking the wheel? It's saving the small folk from the aristocracy that is reinforcing the institutions. The Tarleys are part of that aristocracy maintaining the institutions. Literally, Randall Tarley says, I am supporting Cersei just because she's Westerosi, because she was, born here. Even though, that doesn't make sense with anything like book related or logic related, whatever. Even though that he's literally saying, I would rather uphold the institution that I know than let this person come in and start changing shit. And so no, these people are not the people that she has promised to defend. Those are the small folk. So no, her burning some Tarleys, that literally has nothing to do with breaking the wheel. I'm sorry. Other than, like, it is her actually acting on what the sentiment means and doing it. If anything, it reinforces the idea that she is trying to break the wheel there. What I find disingenuous as a viewer is they're trying, the showrunners, because this is exactly what they're trying to do, are trying to frame this as a bad thing when it is still in line with what she said she was going to do, which we hadn't condemned at the point when she said that she was going to do it. But now that we're getting to the end, they're wanting to, like, leave breadcrumbs of, like, ooh, her doing bad things, but this is not illogical or inconsistent with any position that she has taken before. And so it is literally not until the second to last episode where she goes all cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, she says, I'm Dragon Hitler now, and she starts burning the entirety of King's Landing, civilians and small folk first, that suddenly she is not existing within the confines of the metaphor of the breaking of the wheel, because now she's hurting the people that were supposed to benefit from her breaking the wheel. And again, that's by design. They wanted her to be the bad guy at the end, so that was her doing, like, the ultimate wrong, which is, again, why I think it is such a perplexing storyline, because it is the one thing that is truly out of character. She has a, like, single-minded like, intensity in her mission to, like, free the people that have been enslaved by these systems, and then suddenly, randomly, because bells, and literally, like, don't argue with me, like, well, it was actually because of this. No. The writers of this fuckfest, they said it's the sound of bells that drove her crazy. You can go watch video of it coming out of their mouths, okay? But bells drove her cuckoo, and then she said, you know what? All my characterization, everything I've learned, everything I've ever felt ever for the last, however, 7-8 years, it's out the window. Everyone gets to be barbecue today. So if you like Daenerys as a character, I want you to please listen to me here. Do not defend the bad writing choices that were made. When someone says, like, oh yeah, Dany should have burned King's Landing at the end, that's fucking stupid and insane. The genociding of an entire group of people is always bad. That's why the writers wrote her doing it, so that you had to point to her and be like, that's bad. And when you point to that, when you point to her literally genociding people and saying, like, oh no, they deserve it, blah, 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 you look unhinged and start to paint me, someone who likes Dany by association, as a crazy person. I'm not. The writing at the end of the show was very poor. It was very poor in the choices they made, and not only like the choices of plot points that they made, but like the choices in how to get to those plot points were also fucked. Let's quickly summarize the writing choices that we have been like discussing so far. So, the initial metaphor of breaking the wheel, I don't love it, but we know what it means. It is the aristocracy holding up institutions that are hurting the people on the ground, the small folk. Her offing Tarleys is in line with that sentiment, even if the writers are trying to make you think that it's not. Because the writers, remember, are doing a bad job. They wrote that line, they wrote the whole breaking of the wheel thing, and then in sequential order, they then wrote this Tarley thing, and they don't quite go together because, again, this is totally still in line with what she was talking about. Then, later on, they have her burn a bunch of people. That, yes, is no longer in line with breaking of the wheel, but is also just bad writing because they were trying to get to that ending very quickly for reasons. Because they thought that it would like neatly tie in all the other shit that they had like left behind. Because please remember, if you argue that the show ending is the inevitable book ending, please remember that half the plot points and half the characters are missing. They did not adapt the last 2 books that were published, basically. So no, there is no way that the show ending is the book ending. There are probably elements, but there's a lot of elements that they are like fucking like Frankenstein monstering together. Considering how poorly they write this Dany arc with, you know, inconsistent logic, I would like to argue that this is probably one of them. So yeah, number 1, stop defending Dany in that last episode. It was bad writing. You don't need to defend bad writing. And remember what the wheel metaphor was actually about. Okay, good night, y'all.